Hello, welcome to Pattern Block Dart Manipulation class. My name is Elizabeth Salisbury of ELFC. And so let's get started on materials that you will need. You will need a arm side ruler, and you will also need a regular ruler. You will need some tape. You will need your blocks, both back and front, paper, scissors, a writing utensil. In this case, it is a Sharpie. We're just gonna eat this guy out of here. And some extra paper, all the paper you've saved from when you cut out your darts. So to explain these pattern blocks, these are modern pattern blocks that we are going to close up darts and make somewhat medieval. So I'm going to explain to you how to use them. So this is your back and this is your front. And as you noticed in the armhole, there are little marks here, 2 in the back and 1 in the front, and that is where you line up your sleeves, because even though the sleeve pattern you have today may look the same, they are slightly different in how they set. This is the center back of the pattern, and this is the center front of the front block. There's an apex on the front block, and we will explain what that means in a little while. So first we're going to start by closing up the shoulder dart on the back of your block. As you notice that there is a grain line that runs up. Of course, you can do this at your personal preference. And the reason why pattern blocks do not have any seam allowances is because we are going to cut them. And you will tape and measure and add seam allowance later. This is not meant to be your final pattern. This is meant to be your working pattern. Okay, so another reason to explain what all this verbiage is on here. You have a back basic block, which explains what it is, and of course if you were making something else you would write, you know, German front or German back depending on the piece that you're working on. It says no SA, which means no seam allowance. Cut 2, we've circled the 2. This is an extra large, which is my size. I have my name and my date on it, and you may want to write your own personal measurements on it if you are in between sizes for your bust and your waist. The reason why we do that is so that in the future, when we decide to pull out something and be like, oh, it's 3 years old, have I gained or lost any weight? It's one of those things, and then you can kind of adjust your block to the way you need to go. So let's get into it, shall we? So we are adjusting the shoulder seam, and a good rule of thumb whenever you're adjusting the shoulder here is any cuts you make, and we're going to be making 3 on here. Any cuts you make are the ones that you will have to eventually adjust again. So I'm going to take my Sharpie marker and I'm going to get this about as level as possible, and I like to use the little 1-inch line to make sure it is level. And I'm going to draw a line right through it, touching the point of the shoulder seam dart. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut down this way, I'm going to cut this way, and I'm going to cut this way. I'm going to leave the points here as a hinged foot, essentially. So I'm not going to cut all the way through, I'm just going to leave it as like this teeny tiny minuscule piece of paper that's going to kind of just hang out there, and you'll see why in a minute. But we're going to close up this dart. And to do so, we need to make sure we do it in a way that our whole pattern isn't just going to fall apart. See how this is a hinge? And I'm going to flip it over on this side and do the same on the other side. This really doesn't need to be as intimidating as you think it is. So now we have these 2 guys just freewheeling around. So what we're going to do is we are going to close up, and you can have it laying on top of your pattern or underneath your pattern. It really, that's just personal preference. I like to go underneath so I can see through the paper, and there's a reason for that too. So now that we've closed up our pattern, we're gonna go ahead and tape it up. Do get a little crazy on you. So we've taped it up because that's the way we want it. Now that we've taped it up, okay, great, we've closed up the shoulder seam, but we've actually removed and shoved all of this extra width down below this line. So we're going to measure it, and it's usually about 1/4 of an inch. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less, and mine is just a smidge. So mine's 3/8 of an inch. So I'm going to take extra paper here and tape that down. And I am going to raise this whole shoulder seam by 3/8 of an inch right at the edge. And I'm going to angle it from the point and draw it in. Whenever you adjust your darts, you will always have to adjust the other sides. So here we went from this angle to this angle to this angle. So we have 1, 2, 3 adjustments. That is how that is done. So I also need my little fancy dancy armhole and true up that line. And sometimes you may also have to true this up a little bit too. That in the front absolutely needs to be trued up, and when we say true up, we mean just to make straight, because you will end up with like this minuscule little bump here that needs to be fixed. And it is just that easy to move darts, and then you cut them out. And surprise Ola. But now you're like, wait, Elizabeth, what about this dart? Well, this one's pretty easy considering we're working with medieval patterns, right? We are going to go ahead and measure this, and this should be about 2 inches. Sometimes it's a little bigger. Mine is 2 1/8. So I'm going to bring it down to 2 1/8. Mark it here. Mark it here. Cut it out. Because we just essentially shoved everything that your dart was going to take out into the back seam, and we've closed it up. So then you can just get rid of that, and you have a closed up back. Okay, so let's get started with our front block. So what we're going to do is we're going to draw a line from the tip of the bottom waist dart through the apex up into the shoulder, straight line. And then we are going to connect this point to the apex, so it should be a straight line. And then we're going to draw from the apex to the shoulder seam. Doesn't quite really matter where to put it. I usually put it about 1 inch or so below the sleeve marking. And then we're also going to go from the apex into the neckline. And just as we did before, we're gonna go ahead, I don't need my pen anymore for right now. We're going to go ahead and make sure that that we don't cut all the way through the point. We're just gonna keep it hinged like we did with our back dart. So we're gonna cut up the middle of this dart. And not cut through the apex. We're just gonna leave a little sliver of paper there. We're going to cut on the front of this dart. And repeat on all the lines we drew. And what this is going to allow us to do is open up these seams. shouldn't say seams. What this is going to allow us to do is have enough room to shift that side dart and distribute it evenly throughout the rest of this block. So now that we've done that, so we have a few options. So we're going to open this up a little bit. So 1/8, 1/4, and then another 1/4 here. And you have a few different options. We could go ahead and we can shove this whole dart into the armhole, or we can do half of this dart into the armhole and the other half down at the waist seam. But for right now, let's grab some paper, slide it underneath our pattern here, our block, slide it underneath our block here. Just trying to figure out the best method. There we go. So 1/8, because we'll have to redraw the neckline anyway. So 1/8 is right there, and then 1/4. And then we can kind of just, you know, tape down however. You'll go through a lot of tape when you're working with your working pattern block here. And then we just need to decide how we want to do this. So this is open. So we could, so that's 1/4 and 1/8, just close it up entirely. Okay, so I've just finished cutting everything, but now we have to do a little bit of math. Golly, where did the, I must have moved it. Okay. So, as you notice, we have 1/4 here, but we need to make sure that we take the side of the armhole in by 1/4. And whenever you adjust inside the armhole, you need to make sure that that reflects on your sleeve pattern. So you may just have to add a little bit of a 1/4 there. So I'm gonna go ahead and fix this very carefully. So I'm just gonna blend it in, which is often what we do. So I'm gonna blend it in. I'll trim that off, so that fixes all the extra width here to there. And then we have 1/8 over here that we added into the neck hole, so we need to remove it. And that's not difficult, so we'll put it at the point here and then remove the 1/8 there. And we cut that out. Magic of video editing. That was a long blend. Okay, so what do we do about all of this? Well, that's pretty easy. And I just lost my marker, so we're going with brown. Just rolled off the other end of my table. Okay, so this comes out to 3 3/4 inches. So technically you do the same thing. You would take all this inches, 3 3/4, and measure it from here, 3 3/4, which puts this in a straight line. I'm just gonna mark this right here, and then you come in, same thing we did with our back. I'm gonna come in from the angle and angle it in. Now, not everybody's is like that. It's a little bit different. And then go ahead and mark off the square, the very front of it, because you just removed a whole bunch of inches that you would have been removing anyway if you made a dart. And then you get your front and your back and you measure it, and you should have the measurement that you need. Like, for example, mine is 34 inches. That's my waist. All right, and so now that we have our blocks done, we can go ahead and measure this. We should get 34 inches for an extra large. So that's at 17. I'm gonna double my measuring tape because I hate math, and I am at 34 inches. Should put it this way, 34 exactly. So that is how you manipulate and move darts in a pattern to close up both the front and the back blocks. Thank you for watching.